Hello and welcome to a very special podcast today on Tuesday the 12th of May for International Nurses Day. And I'm pleased to welcome our very special guest Heather Johnstone, who is the Chief Nurse at the 6 CCGs in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent. Hi Heather.
Hi Penny.
Welcome to the podcast. Now today we want to talk about the very special day that today is, and you have a career in nursing and midwifery, which we'll touch on in a moment. Before we do, can you just describe why today is so important?
Yeah, today is really important, not least in the middle of the COVID-19 outbreak, when really this year we should have been celebrating the International Year of the Nurse and Midwife. So we've not been able to do that. All our celebrations have been on hold. So we felt it was really important that today we do celebrate the International Nurses Day and make sure we have some kind of celebration and recognition of the role that our nurses and midwives play in the health service.
And what's it been like for yourself and your team?
Obviously, I've got a lot of staff that aren't nurses and midwives, and we do need to remember that they exist. But for the nurses and midwives amongst us, it's been a really difficult and different time. A lot of the nurses and midwives have been pulled into other jobs. So we've had people working on testing, we've had people working in the hospitals, we've had people working in 111 on the out-of-hours service. Lots of diverse options and different people doing things very different to what their normal day jobs entail.
And on a day like today, is there something that you would like to say to those nurses in your team or those that have been redeployed elsewhere?
This is really quite emotional, actually. I'd like to say a really massive thank you to all the CCG nurses and midwives who've played a role in any aspect of COVID-19's management. Not just that, but in the day-to-day work that they do. And hidden away in the background, we've got a number of individuals like safeguarding who are carrying on doing their normal day jobs, but contributing to us sustaining a safe system while all of this is going on. So a real heartfelt thank you to all of those nurses and midwives that have played a role, especially today.
In the CCGs, there are some people that have been redeployed who perhaps were nurses before and they're doing different roles now in the CCGs. I'm pleased to say that on Friday, we've got another podcast that we're launching that will be highlighting a member of staff that has done just that. Is there anything that you would like to say to them in particular, maybe?
Yeah, there are people that have returned to practice following the call for people to do that. And final year students who've converted to effectively operate as a newly qualified staff nurse many months sooner than they would have done. And I think, we cannot do this job and get through things like COVID without the support of those people who either bring with them the experience or the enthusiasm and energy that you need to be able to go forward. So massive thanks to all of those, massive thanks. We wouldn't have got through, for example, the training programme without the support of some of the people who've retired and taken what must have been a very difficult decision to come back and rejoin the workforce to help us out.
And I think it's been really clear looking and seeing all the news that's been around COVID-19. There has been a lot of love for our nurses, thinking about all the issues that there was with PPE or even, like you say, those returning. I think people seem to be more aware of that kind of role. Would you agree?
I would agree, and I'm sure that my professional colleagues in the organisations at all levels of different professions will probably agree with what I'm about to say, and that is, you might be surprised to hear that it's quite humbling, and sometimes we just want people to stop doing that. And now they've recognised the role that we play, let us get on with doing what we do and what we do really well. Nobody enters nursing to look for the glory and recognition that has gone with the COVID-19 outbreak. And it's quite humbling, and now we just want to get our heads down and get on with our jobs.
For somebody who is working as a nurse, whatever role that may be, I would imagine this is going to be quite a significant part of their career. Is that something that you think nurses will be reflecting on?
Yeah, and I was thinking about this myself only a few days ago, actually. It's been a really hard time and it's going to be a really massive learning experience. Doesn't matter what stage of your career you're at, whether you're a student nurse just coming into being a qualified nurse and learning the ropes, or whether you've been in the NHS for 30 or 40 years, it is a massive and very difficult learning curve, but it's positive and it is an opportunity. There is a real chance to learn things that people will take forward into their careers and continue to build on whatever stage they're at.
So you talked earlier about some of your team members, and you picked up the safeguarding part of your role. Can you just describe the rest of your team and some of the highlights that they do?
Yeah, I've got to be careful not to miss anybody out here because I'll get into trouble for that. Yeah, so we have all of the quality and safety responsibilities. So making sure that the quality and safety of services we commission as CCGs sits under my team's banner. And that is everything from making sure that the contracts for quality are strong and good and monitored and measured, right through to making sure, in the case of safeguarding, we are doing exactly that and safeguarding children and vulnerable adults across the health economy. We also have responsibility for the what was the TCP programme, the Transforming Care Partnership programme, which is around people with learning disabilities. And we have responsibility for the maternity transformation programme, which again is about modernising and improving maternity services to make sure that maternity care is safe. And all of the clinical people working in that team doing those roles couldn't do that without the support of the non-clinical people that contribute to the team agenda. We also do special educational needs and lots of other small projects that sit underneath some of those bigger banners. So it's almost an endless list.
And your role is kind of dual role, isn't it? Because as well as managing that very large team and being the CCG's chief nurse, you also support with some of the local universities.
Yeah, I'm really privileged, really honoured to be a visiting fellow at Staffordshire University. This gives me an opportunity to link in with the Dean of the School of Health, and I can contribute to and to some extent influence some of the work that goes on with development of new nurses to make sure that nurse training programmes are relevant. We often bounce ideas off each other in terms of how we can make things better across the system for people that are coming up through the system as student nurses and other healthcare professionals. Quite often we'll run workshops and roadshows and training and development sessions, and I've been fortunate enough to be asked to contribute to a few of those, particularly focusing on patient safety.
Thinking about your career now, you were trained obviously as a nurse and then you went on to midwifery. Can you share with us a highlight from your midwifery career?
Oh, there's probably far too many highlights to limit it to one. I could probably talk for 3 or 4 hours. It is a real privilege to have been a nurse and a midwife. I would probably say it was delivering my first baby on my own, because that is a really big privilege, a real responsibility. And it takes a long time to train to be a midwife. I was a nurse first, as you said rightly, so I did 3 years nurse training and then an additional 18 months to become a midwife. And to be released when you're qualified to deliver a baby all on your own is a real honour and a privilege, and one I'll never forget.
Can you still picture the lady's face and what it was like to hold the baby?
I can still picture the lady's face, and occasionally, it's really interesting, occasionally you'll walk into town and somebody will stop you and say, "You delivered this person," and this 80-year-old standing next to him. And you do realise that clearly you've left a mark on them. And there's even 1 or 2 of those who work for the CCG at the moment, but I'll respect their confidentiality. They know who they are.
And have you got any special moments or memories from being a nurse?
I remember nursing a man who was end of life, and his family and the love and thanks that they gave me afterwards. I don't know, you just can't put a value on that. It is completely immeasurable. It's a hard job. It is a really difficult, and sometimes it's a really challenging job. But actually, sometimes you need a little bit of humour to get through those days. And without that humour, you probably wouldn't survive, because it can be emotionally quite difficult. When I was a staff nurse, I worked on a male surgical ward. So we were looking after gentlemen who'd had all kinds of surgery. And quite often, the nice little old men who were very, very pleasant were the ones that pinched your bottom when you went over to pass something to them or make their bed when they were in it. That was always a really funny experience. I remember working on Andrew Ward at Sir Robert Peel, and I went round to ask a man if he was okay. I was visiting, actually. I was in a clinical governance role at the time. And we were working on that ward. And I went round and said, is everything okay? Are they looking after you, doing a bit of a check, a bit of a, how's your experience? And he said, it's better now. Are you getting in?
I would imagine you've worked with some very passionate and inspiring people in your career. Is there any particular person that's kind of stuck with you, or maybe a piece of advice that's stuck with you that they've shared with you that you'd like to share?
In terms of inspirational people, yes, you're right. I've met hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of passionate and inspirational people. I think in terms of the piece of advice I was given that probably sticks with me the most, I worked with an older nurse who probably should have been retired 10 or so years at the time, that she was still making beds with me on a ward as a newly qualified staff nurse. And I remember she told me that she thought I'd go a long way in my career. But interestingly, she also told me to never give up, because sometimes it would get really hard. And it was good advice, and I have held on to that advice through my career.
Before I let you go, Heather, I just have one very last question. If there's somebody listening to this podcast today that has maybe been thinking about a career in nursing, what piece of advice would you want to give to them?
I would say, if somebody's thinking about a career in nursing, don't hesitate. Really explore your options. Really dig your heels in and go for it. More and more now, nurse training is modernising. So where it used to be a full-time 3 years, you do as you're told kind of course, there are more and more routes into it now. We're looking at flexible options so that people who are maybe graduates already can convert to be a nurse and do that over a shorter time period. We're even looking at ways that nursing could become a part-time degree so that people can do that whilst raising a family, for example. So I would say, if you're thinking about it, stop thinking about it. If your gut says it's what you want to do, you should really follow that dream, pursue it, and take that advice that I was given. So when the going gets tough, when then dark days come, and they will, don't give up.
Thank you so much for your time, Heather.
Thanks, Penny.